Hello and welcome to this video. Ever wondered why JavaScript sometimes magically converts numbers into strings or vice versa? Or maybe you've struggled with formatting numbers for currency or displaying data in different languages? Well, in this video, we are demystifying type conversions and mastering number formatting in JavaScript. We will dive deep into how JavaScript handles data types, from implicitly joining numbers and strings to explicitly converting objects into JSON. Plus, you will learn the secrets to formatting numbers like a pro, whether it's displaying a price in dollars, euros, or even adding thousands separators based on your locale. Stick around because mastering these concepts will make your JavaScript code cleaner, more efficient, and ready for real-world applications. JavaScript is a dynamically typed language, meaning that variables can change their type, and the language often converts data types automatically. We have the implicit conversion, which is also called the type coercion. In this case, JavaScript automatically converts data types for you. Then we have the explicit conversion, in which you convert data types manually using built-in functions. By the end of this video, you will master type conversions in JavaScript. You will learn how to join data types. You will understand the JavaScript object notation and master number formatting and its application in the real world. Without wasting our time, let's jump in. Here I only have a folder in my code editor. You can create a folder either on your desktop or anywhere you want. So here, let's create a file and let's call this type conversion.js. Also, let's create an index.html file, and through the help of Emmet, let's use the shortcut to generate HTML boilerplate. Simply type exclamation mark and hit enter. Let's change this title to type conversion. In the body, let's simply add h1 and let's call this type conversion. Let's save this file and we can open this file in our web browser. Here on the web browser, you can right click and open this inspect and click on this inspect. You can also do the same thing using Command Option J. This takes us to the console. Let's clear this console using this icon. Great. We said in JavaScript we have two types of conversion. We have the implicit and the explicit conversion. So first we are going to start from the implicit conversion, which is also called the type coercion. Let's create a variable and let's call this age. Let's initialize this to 27. When you check the type of this variable, we should actually see number. Okay, so let's use the type of operator and let's check the type of age. And for us to see anything here in the console, we have to link this JavaScript file to the HTML file. We simply do that using the script tag. And this takes the source attributes. So here we go to type conversion.js. And since this is in the head tag, it is important to add defer. Okay? This is simply because we want the browser to read the content of this HTML first before reading the JavaScript file. So it's going to defer this script. Good. Now, when we save this, we now see number, okay? So the type of age is number. Let's say message, and let's say I am, okay? Let this message be just I am, Let's also check the type of this message. Okay, so type of message, and this should give us string. Okay, string. Now what happens when we try to add this message and this one together? Remember that this is a string and this is a number. Let's use a variable and let's call this description, and this should be equal to message plus age. Remember, string concatenation. We can also use the backticks, but for now, let's do this. And let's console.log. We now get I am 27. No space here because we do not add any space here. To add the space here, we need to introduce this and another concatenation here. So now we see I am 27. What happens when we check the type of this description? Okay, so we use the operator type of and description. Here you see string. This means that when we join a string and a number, JavaScript simply treats it as a string. Remember, we can do the same thing here using backticks. And we say description, and we say description is equal to, so we can use our backticks. We can now use $ opening and closing curly bracket to add a variable or expression. So here, let's now say message, okay, and now we can add space and do the same thing for the age and save this file. Now let's console.log description again. Okay, here you see I am 27, and when we check the type of, that should also give us string. So basically, when you join a number and a string, you simply get a string. Great. Let's now look at what happens when we try to join a number and a string using either minus or multiplication operator. Okay, so here let's say my code is equal to 222, and let my num1 be equal to, let's say 10. Let results be equal to code minus num1. Okay, let's see what happens when we do this. Remember that here, this should be a string. So let's check the type of console.log type of code. You see, this gives us string. We can actually add another thing here. So you can actually add some description so that you'll be able to understand what you are seeing in the console. So here, let's simply write code. Okay. So here we are checking type of code, and we see that this is a string. Now let's do the same thing for our num1, and let's change this to num1. Here should be num1, and let's save this. We now see num1 is a number. Okay, and for this we see a number. Now in line 17, we are trying to subtract a number from a string. So console.log. So here, let's use this, and you must put comma here, and let's call these results. Okay, so we understand what we are saying in the console. And let's also check the type of results. And here we simply say type of results. Okay, so remember, you must put comma here, and let's save this now. So for results, you see 212, which is correct because 222 minus 10 is 212. And the type of is number. You see that the result of using subtraction on a string and a number simply gives us number. Okay, so here JavaScript coerces this string into a number. Okay, that is also true if we use multiplication. So for example, if we put multiplication here and save it, you see that this is also true. So here you also get number. For multiplication and subtraction, we get number. But if we change this to plus, this is going to be string. So what JavaScript will simply do is to take 222 and of course concatenate 10 to it. That will be 22210. Okay, should be equal to. Now let's see what happens when we try to add a string of this type. So here we have this message where we said I am. Okay, let's take that text message and now let's subtract num1. Let's see what happens. So if you do console.log new num, we're actually going to get not a number. Let's save this. You see, here we have not a number. And this makes sense because if you look at what this is, okay, this is just a plain text. Okay, this is simply a text. JavaScript could not coerce this into a number. In this case, JavaScript could coerce this into a number, okay, when we apply subtraction or multiplication. But in this case, JavaScript is trying to perform an arithmetic operation on something that is actually not a number. Okay, so the result of this operation is simply not a number. Okay, now all these examples are what we call implicit conversion. This is because JavaScript did this automatically for us. Okay, now let's look at an example of explicit conversion. In our daily work as a developer, sometimes we encounter a situation where we have to convert a specific data type into another in order to obtain a desired result. In this case, we explicitly convert the data type. So for example, let's define a variable. Let's call this secret code and let this be 200. Okay. Of course, the type of this should give us a number. Okay. Now let's convert this to a string. So let's say secret code string, and pay attention to my naming. Okay. Your variable name must be descriptive. So here, let's say secret code string is equal to, we simply use the string method. JavaScript gives us access to this string method. Remember that every primitive type actually have an underlying object wrapper. We are going to look at this in detail as we move on with this series. Okay, so here let's simply put our secret code and save this file. So first, let's console.log type of secret code. Okay, and here we now console.log on line 25, which is this. Okay, line 25, we get number. Okay, we know that this actually is a number. Then you see now that next we now have string. Okay, because we explicitly converted this into string. Okay, we can also convert a string into a number. So let's say friend age be equal to 30. So let my string test be equal to, let's say C6. We know that this is a string because when you check the type of, my string test should simply give us string. To change this to a number, my string test num is equal to, so we simply use the number wrapper. So we also have this number, we can use this method, and here we now pass our my string test and save this. So we can now check the type of my string test num, and this should simply give us a number. So here we converted a number to string. And here we see how we can actually convert a string to a number. Now, another thing we can check, let's say we have a text which is equal to hello. Okay. And now the question is, can we actually convert this also to a number just as we did here? It is important to understand all this because you will see the beauty of this in your work as a JavaScript developer. So let's see what happens when we try to console.log. Okay, so let's try and convert that string into a number. So let's put our text here and save this file. Okay, JavaScript could not transform this into a specific number. Okay, it's simply going to tell us that, hey, look, this actually is not a number. But in this case, of course, 66, we can argue it that when we remove the quotes, 66 can simply be seen as a number. Okay, so that is very important to understand. Let's now look at what happens when we join a Boolean and a string together. Okay, so let's say is logged in should be equal to true. Okay, so a user is logged into our application. And let's now check the status. Logged in status be equal to, so let's add a string here, user logged in. And here, let's concatenate this with the Boolean. So we say is logged in. So let's now check logged in status. And also let's check the type of logged in status. And we see the type of logged in status is actually a string. So when we try to join a non-string value with a string using this operator, which we use for concatenation or backticks. Remember, for concatenation, we use backticks or this plus operator. We simply get string, okay? So either you use this concatenation operator, which is plus, or using the backticks, we simply get string. We can also use the string function on a Boolean. Okay, so here, let's say const check logged in, and let this be equal to string is logged in. So remember, is logged in is a Boolean. Okay, if you check the type of is logged in is a Boolean, we can also convert it to a string using this, because now when you check the type of check logged in, so let's check the type of this, we simply get string. Okay, but if you check the type of is logged in, we should simply get a Boolean. And here we have Boolean. Always remember to make use of the documentation. Play around with this part by checking this documentation. Now let's look at the JavaScript object notation. JavaScript object notation, known as JSON, is a lightweight data interchange format that is easy for machine to parse and generate. This is used to send and receive structured data over a network. A good use case of this is in a web APIs. You will see this in practice later in the series, but understanding this JSON is very important, because with this JSON, we can convert objects to string and also convert string back to objects. JSON is written in key value pairs. Where keys are strings, values can be strings, numbers, arrays, booleans, objects, or any other data type. Now, this is a good example of JSON. If you look at this very well, it is similar to the object literal, but in this case, the property names and any string value requires double quotes. Okay, the property name, in this case, we have name, amount, discount, summary, description, etc. And any string value actually requires double quote, not a single quote, but double quote. And in JSON, there is no undefined properties or a function. Okay, we can have a number, a string which must be in double quotes. We can have an array, but we can't include undefined or function. This is very important to understand. Great. Now let's go to the code editor and see JSON in action. Great. Here, let's add a comment and let's call this JSON. So first, we are going to create a simple object, and let's call this object details. Okay. And remember how to create an object. Let's simply use the object literal. And here, let's add name. Let this be Alice. Okay. And let's add age. Let's say Alice is 30. And let's check if Alice is actually active. And let's say this is false. Now let's console.log. Here, let's call this details. And now let's put details. And let's save this. So in our VS Code, we now have details, which is actually an object. Okay. we want to convert this object into a string. Okay, we want to convert this into a string because in real world application, converting object to string and string to object is actually very important. Let's see what happens when we say details string is equal to, let's use this string. Okay, let's try and use this string method and pass our details. Okay, this is actually going to give us something strange. We are going to say something like object. So let's now console.log details string, and this simply gives us a generic string representation. We get this object. This is because the default to string is called on this object. Okay, and this gives us generic string representation. This is actually a string representation, and we can confirm that by checking the type of this. Okay, so let's check the type of details string. That should actually give us string. Okay, but what actually can we do with this? If you are working in a real web application and you get this, what actually can you do with this? Do you get the point? So here, in order to convert this to actual string that we want, which is going to be the JSON format, okay, JavaScript gives us access to two important methods. So let's say const details converted should be equal to details new details correct string is equal to. So in order to convert this object to string, we need to call JSON. So we have this JSON object. So we need to call JSON.stringify. Okay, we used stringify, and here we now pass our object, which is details. We are going to understand all this in details very soon, but actually JavaScript gives us access to this. Okay, so now when we console.log details correct string, okay, let's check. We now have this. Instead of object, we now have the correct string. You see, this actually, it is exactly JSON. Okay, so you see that the key name here is in double quotes, and any string value is also in double quotes. Okay, just as we've seen before. So let's do one thing. Let's also check the type of detailed correct string, and we see that this now is actually a string, which is correct. Perfect. Now, what happens when we now try to convert JSON? We want to convert JSON back to an object. Remember that this details correct string is now a string, right? Let's now convert it back to an object. And to do that, let's call this new details object, and let this be equal to convert JSON back to an object, we simply use JSON.parse. Okay, and here we pass the JSON object, which is actually a string, and let's save this. So now let's console.log new details object. Okay, now we see an object. Note the difference between this. This is pure object, and actually this one is actually a JSON, and this is a JSON. Okay, now let's check the type of this, type of new details object, and let's save this. You see, we now have an object. Here we have a string, but now we have an object. So that's the conversion from an object to a string, and a string back to an object. Imagine you are working on a financial application where you have to deal with numbers and currency. So for instance, displaying numbers in the correct form, displaying prices based on several countries. Remember, in this case, you have to look at the country, and each country have different currencies, right? So you have to consider how you can correctly format your numbers and not display them just anyhow. in your web application. So let's look at how we can format numbers. Now let's look at how we can properly work with numbers in JavaScript. Perfect. Here I'm going to create another file and I'm going to call this number formatting. And I'm going to call this number formatting.js. Okay, now in our HTML, let's remove this. Instead, add number formatting.js. Okay, let's start by defining a number. So let's call this price. Let's say this is 9.54925. What happens if your product manager wants you to display this number in 2 decimal places? Okay, so after this decimal point, we need just 2 numbers. What do? To achieve this, we simply have to fix these numbers. Okay, to achieve this, we have to fix these numbers. Okay, in this case, we are simply going to call the toFixed method on this particular price. So let's see that in action. Console.log price, okay, dot toFixed. And here you need to pass in how many decimal places. For instance, our product manager said in 2 decimal places. When you save this file, you should get 9.55. And it is 55 because here is 9. Remember, in mathematics, if this is 5 or above, we are going to add 1 to the number before that. Okay, so let's save this. And in the console, you simply see 9.55. Great. Now, what happens if your product manager now said, oh no, on this page, actually, let it be 1 number after the decimal point? You simply use your toFixed, and here you simply put 1. Very simple. And that simply gives us 9.5. Why 9.5? That is because 4 is not up to 5. Okay, do you understand that? Assuming this is 5, we are simply going to get 9.6, but the number we have here is 4. Okay, great. Now what happens if you want to round this number to the nearest integer? Now, so let's look at rounding numbers to nearest integers. Okay, so here we are simply going to do this using the math object. JavaScript gives us access to a global math object. This math object enable us to perform lots of operation. Okay, so we can take the square root of a number, we can find the tan, we can find the cosine, we can take the logarithm, we can do anything. You see, we can take the tan theta, anything. So in this case, we actually want to use the floor. So, and after you call the floor, you now need to pass the number. In this case, we are passing our price. If you save this, you get 9. Why? When you call the floor method, it's going to give you only the integer parts. Okay, so for instance, if this is 19, it will give you 19. Since we have 9, you have 9. So it's going to forget about these decimal parts and it's going to simply give you 9. We also have math.sale, and here let's pass our price. This is going to return the smallest integer greater than the numeric arguments. Okay, so in this case, we have 10. Now we also have what we call math.round, and let's pass our price. And of course, this is going to round. Okay, this is like the normal round up. So this is the round up in mathematics. And this floor is like round down. So this is the normal round up in mathematics. So since we have 5 here, this is going to be 10. For instance, if this is 2, we actually get 9. Okay, you see, because this is not up to 5. So again, I'm going to refer you to MDN. Okay, MDN JavaScript math object. You will see a link to this particular page. You can read up, just play around all the methods attached to this math object. Okay, reading the documentation is very, very helpful. Please check this out. Now let's look at what happens when we try to format a number based on a specific country. In this case, we have to talk about what we call locale. Okay, so here let's say formatting a number based on country or region. So the point is, what actually is locale? Locale is simply parameters that defines users' language, regions, and any specific variant preferences that the user wants to see in their user interface. Okay, so for instance, we might be building a web application that several countries have to use. We have to display data, especially numbers, based on those countries. Okay, let's say my local number is equal to 2490000. My local number formatted should be equal to my local number dot. So here JavaScript also gives us access to local string. Okay, so we can use this dot local string, and now we have to pass the locale identifier. So we need to use the locale identifier. So this here is the identifier, and the identifier consists of at least a language code and a country. In this case, we have a language code, which is DE for German and DE for German. Okay, so this represents the language and this represents the country. Okay, so let's see what this is. Console.log, my local number formatted. Let's save this file. So in German, this number 2,490,000 is written in this way. Now let's see what happens when we, instead of using DE, so let's copy this. Okay, and let's put it here. And here, let's put IT for Italian, and let's change DE to IT. And of course, the country is IT. Now let's console.log my local formatted IT. Now we have this. So in Italy is also written the same way. Let's see how it is written in US. Okay, so let's copy these two lines. Let's put it here and change this to US. So English for language and US for the country. And this should be US. And in US, they use comma. So you can actually check what happens for different country. Okay, and if you search online or go to the MDN, you actually see a list of all this country code. Okay, you see the language code and also the country code. You can check that out and see what you use in your country. Next, let's now look at currencies. How can we actually undo currencies for several countries? So first, let's define a variable and let's call this my salary. Let this be equal to 80,000. Also, let's define my monthly salary. So this becomes 80,000 divided by 12. That should give my monthly salary. Okay, now let's check my monthly salary to, let's say, 2 decimal places. And remember, to achieve that, we take monthly salary dot to feast. Okay, and here we pass to salary to 2 decimal places. And here, this is my monthly salary in 2 decimal places. Great. Now, let's see how this salary will be displayed, for instance, in US. So let's salary formatted. And for this, we have to use a new keyword. I know you might either be new to JavaScript or already working as a JavaScript developer. So if you are new to JavaScript, don't worry about this new keyword. We are going to see this in detail later in the series. But in order to show you this result, we simply have to use this new keyword, and we are going to call the Intl.NumberFormat. Okay, so we are going to use this number format, and this number format takes several arguments. The first one is going to be the code we used initially. So let's pass the language. Here we say EN, and we want to check for US. Next, we need to pass an object. Okay, so inside this object, let's now add the style. This is an option. where we can actually tell JavaScript that this is a currency. Okay. Now, after this style, we can now pass currency, and here we simply use USD. Okay. USD for dollar. And after this, we now have to call the format. And what exactly do we want to format? We want to format salary to 2 places. Okay. Salary to 2 places. Instead of 2 places, this should be 2 decimal places. We have to be more descriptive. So let's correct this. And here, great. Now let's check this. So console.log salary formatted, and we see in US, we now get this dollar. And actually, this is the way it is written in US. Now, if you want to check in other languages, for instance, in German, so this will be DE and DE. Okay. So instead of USD, this should be EUR for euros. And in euros, it is written this way. So you can check this in Japanese yen. You can check how it is written in your own country. Perfect. So this is how we can simply format numbers in JavaScript. What actually is the type of this formatted number? Actually, this should give us string. So type of salary formatted. Here you see we get string. This is very important because in your daily life as a developer, for instance, if you're working in a very big web application, you could be performing an operation, maybe a mathematical operation on a formatted number, and you actually forget that the type of that formatted number is no longer number, but string. So taking your time to understand this basic concept will actually ease your daily work as a developer. Thank you for being part of this video. If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment in the comment section. See you in the next video. One love.